Hello, it is absolutely fantastic to see so many of you here. I'm Laura Spence. I'm a Professor of Business Ethics and Sustainability at our Centre for Sustainable Business here at King's, and I'm also on the Advisory Council for the Institute of Business Ethics. So you can see how the stars collide, and I want to thank Jonathan Pinkser, who's the Director of the Centre for Sustainable Business, who will answer all your questions afterwards, of course. For supporting this event here. And it's a joy to be able to bring together IBE and the Centre for Sustainable Business as two of my very favourite things, and particularly in relation to Guido Palazzo's talk, who's I've long been a friend and fan of. So I know that you will enjoy it. I should, as the sort of resident King's person, point out the fire exits to your left here and back down the way you came. And the loos are just outside in that main entrance. It's a beautiful place to hold an event. Do make sure that you have a look at the view and take in the sort of central London perspective. It really helps to have a good feel for the position that we're in here. So I'm going to hand over to Flora I'm going to riff for a bit. Well, yes, one of my favourite jokes. No, I won't do that. But I know that there's a lot of King's people here, and there's a lot of members of and subscribers to the IBE. So I really hope that you get a chance to chat afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I can speak now. It's my very great pleasure to start off with a thank you to King's College, of course, and to Professor Spence. And of course, it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Guido Palazzo, who is Professor of Business Ethics at the University of Lausanne. I think I've pronounced that correctly, in Switzerland. And the lecture will introduce us to his fascinating work on the dark pattern. This is work that he's done with his colleague, Ulrich Hofrege, and it was published last year in the book that's sitting right in front of me, The Dark Pattern. But it is also a new twist. Sorry, we'll pick that up in a minute. It's a new twist because we're looking in particular at the work that he's done as applied to the big tech companies, which of course is absolutely hot topic. And corporate scandals in general that he's been looking at in his book as applied to the big tech companies right now is potentially anticipating the new wave of corporate scandals. So it's absolutely crucial stuff, and it will be fascinating for us all to hear Professor Palazzo's thinking on this critical issue at this critical time. Now, this won't be easy listening, and that's intentional. It will be instead, I hope, we expect, thought-provoking. It's particularly important to have these sort of difficult ethical conversations in a way which is encouraging for us all to think for ourselves, to face these confrontational difficulties in a way that's engaging, that's respectful, that's a demonstration of how we can have debate and discussion in a free society and in a way which allows us all to engage in our own ways. So that's something that we hold very dear at the Institute of Business Ethics, and that means that it's part of our overall work, which we do to make sure that people can come together and talk about these challenging ethical issues. It's not just at these big hot ticket events like tonight, but it's also in the quieter convenings that we hold all the time through our networks, where people have the opportunity to come and talk over the critical issues, the things that are really on their minds, the things that they're worrying about, the things that are keeping them up at night. And it gives them an opportunity, it gives our supporters an opportunity to meet in a context where they can talk with people who might otherwise be competitors, and yet talk freely and talk in a way that's supportive and open about the pressing concerns that we all face. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank our supporters wholeheartedly for the opportunity to hold these wonderful big events like this, but also for the day-to-day work that goes on throughout the year, where people meet in the quieter contexts that I've just described. And so none of that would be possible, of course, without our supporters. And that's something that we're holding particularly firmly to in this year, our 40th year, which we're very proud of. We're very proud that we have been a part, or a sort of a core part of business ethics for 40 years. Many of our supporters have been with us for a very long time. We hope that our new supporters will stay with us for a very long time, because ethics and integrity never goes out of fashion. It never goes away. It is absolutely a source of strength and purpose and certainty in difficult times, which we are living through. And so at its core, the IBE is offering a place for that independent, non-partisan convenings that allows people to hold on to those core strengths and those values that hold us in a time when we're all feeling the winds of change and worrying about what the future holds. So thank you to our current supporters, thank you to our past supporters over the 40 years, and let us all hold on to the fact that integrity is the core that gives us strength and purpose. It isn't always easy to do the right thing, but how much worse would it be having to live with having done the wrong thing? And so with that in mind, let us put our thinking caps on and turn our minds to tonight's lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Flora and Laura, for the introduction. I'm happy to be here, and I hope this thing works, because it crashed. And I'm basically talking about two things today. I'm going to lead you quickly through my book, The Dark Pattern, which tries to answer the question of how is it possible that people like you and me, under certain circumstances, participate in illegal, immoral activities we normally would never dream of participating in. Because if you look into corporate scandals, what you find is that it's people like you and me. It's us. It's not bad people. It's rarely bad people. It's average people, people with good values, good intentions, and yet something happens that they deviate from their own values. This is the first part, and since I have done this already online for the Institute, Laureen asked me to add something, and that is my interpretation of what's going on in Silicon Valley right now as a next step of this dark pattern analysis. It's not working. Do we have another one?
It might not be switched off. Is it switched off?
Switch off and...
Yeah, there's usually a little trick to it. No, trick doesn't work. No. Yeah, no.
It does. Thank you. So when we look at these corporates, and you find a scandal almost every day in the news, a new one. And when you read about this, when we watch these documentaries on Netflix or elsewhere, we all show normally a very similar reaction. We think this is horrible, but we would never have done it. And we have a second reaction, that is, we look at these things and we ask ourselves, why did nobody see it coming? It is so obvious afterwards that this was not going in a good direction. Why did we not see it earlier? And there's a third question, and that is the question that brought me to write this book together with my colleague Ulrich Hofrage, and that is the question of, across all these scandals, is there maybe something that happens again and again? Is there a pattern? Is there a repeating type of wrong behavior, cultural failure, leadership failure? Because if we would have a repeating pattern, we might analyze this proactively and stop bad things from happening in organizations. So what is the pattern that connects? I will not go, and the dark pattern that we find has actually 9 elements. That's why we initially wanted to call this book Inferno, following Dante, because Dante's hell has also 9 circles. But our publisher in the US said, if you call it Inferno, then no one in America will understand this, and it will be a niche book, so don't call it like that. So we call it the dark pattern. 9 elements. I will focus here on 5, maybe the 5 most important ones in this dark pattern, and from there guide you to applying this to what's going on in Silicon Valley right now. So let me start with leadership. There's one thing you find in all these scandals, and that is toxic leaders, psychopath leadership style, a culture of fear where people think it is not possible to speak up. So whatever I observe around me, I cannot speak about this. Whatever I'm asked to do, I have to do it, because asking questions is not possible in my organization. Think about Dieselgate. 2007, US authorities changed the rules for diesel emissions. And all diesel producers are asked to reduce diesel emissions by 2/3. They're given 2 years to achieve that. Martin Winterkorn, at that time, CEO of Volkswagen, gives a press conference and he says, we will be ready. Engineers start to work on this filter. And they realize after 1 year, roughly, they cannot make it. It's not possible. Not within the limits of budget and time they were given. They have 2 options now. They can go to him and tell him, Mr. Winterkorn, we have a problem. Or they find a solution. And as we then later learned, they found a solution. And this solution was to program the board computer, the software of the car, in a way that the car would comply with the law in the lab test, but not on the street. Estimated damage, 40 billion euros. So if managers tell me, why would I care about ethics? My answer is always 40 billion euros. Or 80 billion, that's the price tag of Boeing, 80 billion. To have these kind of cultures where people break the rules can be very expensive, can destroy entire companies like Credit Suisse, for instance. So they can go to him and tell him we have a problem, but they don't do that because he has forbidden the word problem. At Volkswagen, he said, if you have a problem, you are a problem, because good managers don't have problems. So they know if they go to him, that's the last thing they do in this company. It's the end of their career. He was a yeller. He would yell at people. He would humiliate top managers in front of suppliers, customers. He would randomly fire someone and maybe hire them back the next day. He would not tolerate someone speaking up with an opinion that is not his own. He was a psychopath. And if I say psychopath, it's not necessarily a clinical psychopath, because we cannot know this without doing tests, but at least a behavioral psychopath. For the victims, that doesn't matter. It's the same. So Volkswagen had a climate of total obedience. Der Spiegel, which is a German news magazine, they published an article about this company 2 years before it happened, before the scandal happened. And there's one sentence that sticks out of this article. You still can find this online. This is North Korea minus the concentration camps or the labor camps. I mean, you know that this culture is not healthy. Everyone can see it from outside. You can read articles about this. There's something that is not okay in this company. And it's certainly not something that promotes good behavior. So there's one example. The other example to talk about toxic leadership is maybe the most drastic case in the book. It's France Telecom. And in certain dimensions comparable to the post office scandal, which came too late for my book. I wanted to include this, but my data collection was not yet finished when the book had to be finished. So But you will, if you know something about the post office scandal, you will find my elements in it, certainly. France Télécom was the French telecommunications service that was in 1999 privatized. You know, like many European telecommunication services were privatized. The people working there were civil servants. And when they were privatized, unions had negotiated with the government that they remained civil servants. They could not be fired. In 2005, a new CEO arrives. He's under immense pressure. Numbers are not good. The share value has crashed. He calculates he has 22,000 people too many. He cannot fire them. And it's not just that he has too many people, he has the wrong people. He has technicians, a lot of technicians. Technicians are people who, at that time, had this job to go to households and install telephones or fix them. You don't need thousands of them anymore. You need mobile phone experts, you need internet experts. You have technicians. And he told his top managers that he needs to get rid of them. And he told them this: I will get the departures one way or another, through the door or through the window. And then he sent his top 500 managers to a training in psychological warfare. And he connected their bonus to one thing: the number of people leaving the company voluntarily. So these managers came back from their training and they started to make life of those they targeted to leave hell. For instance, you cannot be fired, but you can be moved across the country. You're a civil servant, you cannot refuse that. You can move between jobs. So imagine you are a technician. You have never worked with a computer in your whole life. On a Friday evening, you get a phone call that on Monday morning you will sit in a call center. Zero training. If you talk longer than 5 minutes, they yell at you. And that's just one of many, many examples. They make life of people difficult to force them to volunteer to leave. And leaving they did. The company was hit by a wave of suicides. 140 suicides and suicide attempts in 3.5 years. People jumping from the roof of the company, burning themselves on the parking space, hanging themselves at home in the uniform of the company. And they all leave letters in which they refer to the company being the reason why they kill themselves. A climate that is so toxic, where you are so humiliated that you prefer to die. So this is the first element that you find across all these scandals. And I would include the post office. If I would put it in the book, I would tell the story also like that. A leadership of fear, a climate of fear, where speaking up is not an option, just not possible. Now imagine you have that climate and you are given goals that you cannot achieve. Not ambitious goals, totally unrealistic goals. And you know you cannot say that. You cannot go to your boss and say, these goals are not realistic, because you have fear. You will be fired. What will you do? You will do what it takes to achieve those goals. And one case that sticks out of that is the Wells Fargo story, biggest American retail bank. 100,000 salespeople commit fraud. 100,000. So they had the strategy of selling 8 products to each customer. Why 8? Well, they realized every American has on the average 16 bank products, bank accounts, credit cards, insurances, 16. And they said, we want half of that for us, 8. 8 is great, that's how they call it. And you see how they, over the years, they moved from 3.2 to 6.27. 6.27 is 4 times more than any other bank in the US could achieve. 4 times more. Nobody ever asked, how can we be 4 times better than the others with the same people, the same products, the same procedures? Well, the only reason why they could be better was that 100,000 salespeople took the signatures of their customers and opened bank accounts, credit cards, insurances for them without them knowing about it, charging them a fee on their regular account, focusing this on elderly people, immigrants, and people with financial problems who would not dare to speak up. If you do this a few million times, you achieve your goals. When this scandal broke out, these salespeople, they were, of course, investigated, and they had interesting things to say about their work at Wells Fargo. So you see, this is worth looking into. There's a video where Elizabeth Warren, the senator, grills the CEO of the company, John Stumpf. But what really is amazing is what these people had to say about their job. I had managers yelling at me. The sales pressure was unbearable. You would sit in an open space office and try to sell stuff, and you wouldn't achieve your quota because your quota was totally unrealistic. And your boss comes to you 4 times a day, yelling at you in front of everyone, telling you should go and work for McDonald's if you're not good enough to be a Wells Fargo banker, 4 times a day. There were numerous days where I would hide in the men's bathroom crying. The last 3 months were hell. Even though I was reaching my sales goals, it was not enough for them. Then she testified in the US Congress that she was achieving 110% of her quota. And her boss told her, no, in your case it's 120. So you always run behind, you never achieve your goals. Everyone yells at you all the time. My favorite quote, this is sad and hard for me to say, but I had less stress in the Gulf War than working for Wells Fargo, a former soldier. So he exposed people to so much pressure. And they see left and right their colleagues cheating. And it's tolerated. They get promoted. They get their bonus. So why would I not do that? They yell at me the whole day, right? You'd start doing the same. And not because you're greedy or because you want to make much money, but because you are desperate. You're under pressure. A third element that you find across all these scandals is what we call destructive incentives. What's that? Maybe the most toxic thing that has ever been introduced into management is the Gauss curve. And probably many of your companies use the Gauss curve as well. Who did this? Who knows that? Who did this? Jack Welch. When he became CEO of General Electric, he introduced this because he said, well, actually in any company there are high performers, average performers, and low performers, and I don't want low performers. He called low performers dead wood. Dead wood. I don't want dead wood in my company. In his first top management meeting, 500 GE managers in a big room, he told them, look to the left, look to the right, you will not see these people anymore in the future. And then he fired most of them. Every manager, that was the rule he introduced, every manager had to designate 20% low performers every year in their teams, on every level. Regardless of performance, you can be the best team in the whole company. You still have to say, these 5 are our low performers, and we fire them immediately. What you create is not a culture of collaboration, of performance. You create a culture where my survival depends on the fact that you don't survive, or some of you don't survive. It's Hunger Games. And there are 2 things that research shows us about this curve. First of all, it doesn't exist in companies. Performance does not distribute like this in companies. And second, it does not promote performance. In the short run, yes, because fear is a great promoter, but not in the long run. We know it doesn't work. We know it doesn't exist, but we still use the same method most of the time in companies. And the bad thing is maybe not to evaluate people. The bad thing is what you do to the low performers. The humiliation, the fear, the firing, that is what is not so good. You have to cut the throat of your enemy. Richard Fuld was the CEO of Lehman Brothers, the only bank that went bankrupt in the financial crisis. And when he was saying that to his traders, he was giving them plastic swords. Cut the throat of your enemy. And the enemy was not Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. The enemy was your colleague. 20% would be fired at the end of the year. You want to survive? Cut some throats. So you create a climate of throat cutting. My survival depends on your descent into something that I would not want to be in. At France Telecom, they would put a flip chart in the corner with the names of the team members ranked with their performance of the day before. The civil servants in the team, they were highlighted. So if you are down in the list and you are a civil servant, you know that you might be the one who gets targeted next. At Wells Fargo, they would send around an email with the ranking of everybody from the day before so that you can see who are the low performers, the losers in my team, and where am I in that list. Fourth element, add to this what we call ambiguous rules. What is this? This is EPO. EPO is the drug that Lance Armstrong used to win the Tour de France 7 times. Not just Lance Armstrong, all of them used it. Marco Pantani, Jan Ullrich, everyone. EPO gives you 10 to 15% more performance. And 10 to 15% more performance is worlds apart in professional cycling. At that time of Lance Armstrong, who was winning the Tour de France 7 times with EPO, they could not find out whether someone had used the drug, because the only thing they could find out was there was a higher level of red blood cells in the blood, which is the result of EPO, but it can also be the result of a training in the mountains. You don't know. You have no proof. So what did they do? They fixed a limit. They said, well, whoever is above 50% red blood cells is a doper. Whoever is below 50% is not a doper. The average red blood cell level of a professional cyclist is 42 to 43%. So what you have as a rule is not do not dope. The rule that you have is do not dope too much. Imagine you would tell your sales teams, you can actually bribe, but not too much. That's the rule. And under the pressure, you have fear. Your goals cannot be achieved. You get humiliated every day. Of course, you shift towards the darker gray zones. What you create, what they created, and what companies very often create is a zone between right and wrong where everything is up to interpretation. You see someone breaking the rules, but he or she is a successful salesperson. And the boss tolerates that. So you understand, okay, as long as I'm successful, I can do certain things and not others. Gray zone, unclear rules. Take the case of Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes creates a startup. She's a Stanford dropout. And she promises that she can develop a machine that does 250 blood tests with some drop of blood from your fingertip without pain. You can do a blood test every day. And if you are in healthcare, you know that blood tests are at the foundation of everything. And it's expensive, it's unpleasant, it takes an expert. And she says you can do 250 of those tests at home, alone, every day. You put this into the machine, the Edison, and the Edison sends the data to Theranos, and they analyze your blood. So you can, for instance, find out that you have cancer way earlier than with the old methods. You can bring healthcare at a very low price to countries that are too poor for other types of healthcare. So revolutionary thing. The only problem, didn't work. It didn't work. She could do 2 blood tests, not 250. Her engineers were working day and night. I'm convinced that Elizabeth Holmes, until today, thinks she would have made it. She just needed more time. And isn't it the same that we expect from any kind of startup? We tell them, you must tell a big story, because I don't give you money if you have a small story. I want you to overpromise. Steve Jobs would fake features of new products sometimes because they were not yet ready when he was presenting new products, but they were ready when they would sell them. Everyone is doing that. The difference here is she's in healthcare. She's working with real patients. But fake it till you make it is normal Silicon Valley behavior. It's normal startup behavior. So where is this point in between right and wrong where we could say, okay, until here it's okay, but from here on it's fraud? I think this point doesn't exist. Her husband, she's in prison now. Her husband has just created a new blood testing business with the same idea. So they still believe in it. We are very often creating contexts in which people do not know what the rules are because there are 2 contradictory ways of interpreting them. And under the pressure of the fear, the incentives, the goals, we might just interpret them too far. And the last one I want to bring, so there are 9, but I focus on 5 here for reasons of time, because I want to show you something in addition, the next step. Maybe the most important element of the dark pattern is what we call rigid ideology. And it's what we are teaching in business school since decades. You must maximize profit. The market regulates itself. Regulation anyway is bad. We need small governments, not big governments. We are all egoistic, but markets automatically turn egoism into welfare for everybody, which is a fairy tale. It's not based on facts, but we believe it. Trickle-down effect. There's no trickle-down effect. We teach it. So people leave business schools with this idea in mind: my only responsibility is to maximize profits. And then they do say things like the CEO of Boeing, Harry Stonecipher, who came from the team of Jack Welch, who had worked with Jack Welch at GE. He had learned from Jack Welch how you maximize profit. You do two things. First of all, you fire most of your people. Jack Welch fired 25% of his team in the first 4 years, thousands of people. Stonecipher comes to Boeing, he fires 25% of the people in the first 4 years, especially expensive engineers, older engineers, replaced by younger engineers. Knowledge gets lost. The second thing you do to maximize profit is you buy back your own shares. GE would do this a lot. Why would you do share buybacks? Well, if you buy as a company your own shares, they get cancelled out, number of share goes down, value of the share goes up. It's a very simple transaction. So you do two things that have nothing to do with innovation, performance, quality. You fire a lot of people and you buy your own shares. You invest billions in your own shares and your shareholder value goes up and up and up until it doesn't. And as you might remember, GE was close to bankruptcy at one point. And at Boeing, it resulted in designing an airplane, the 737 MAX, that crashed twice 6 months after it was produced. You don't focus on quality, you focus on speed and cost, make it cheap for your customers. But you believe that you are fully aligned with your ideology, with your belief system. Or think about the CEO of Enron, who said, "I'm doing God's work," when he was asked why he would so egoistically just maximize the interest of Enron. By the way, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, said the same after the financial crisis when he started in 2008, I guess, to repay billions in bonuses. And the Financial Times asked him, "But aren't these bonuses one of the drivers of the crisis?" He said, "I'm doing God's work." It's hardwired in leaders because we trained them to believe that the market is divine and that egoism is their only responsibility. And here is where now a shift happens. Because Silicon Valley comes with a new type of ideology, and it's not getting better. It's not getting better. And I would like to lead you through what I think is now happening in Silicon Valley, which ends up with Elon Musk's Nazi salute. What's going on in these people? Technofascism, the next ideological step people in Silicon Valley are taking. It's a threat to democracy, what we are right now observing there. And it is creating the next wave of companies who think rules don't count for them. Rules count for all the others, not for them. So what are the key elements? 3 that I think are to be highlighted. The first one is Silicon Valley believes that AI will lead us to paradise. They call this abundance. Abundance means AI alone will create so much richness in society, will solve so many problems that we should not worry about anything, poverty, climate change. No, we will live in paradise. It's worth to listen to the TED Talk of Sam Altman, OpenAI. He says something interesting in his TED Talk. He says, it will be a world of incredible material abundance, the future, the near future, where individual abilities are so far beyond what a person can do today. I hope that my children and all your children will look at us with a little pity and nostalgia. They have lived such horrible lives, us. They were so limited. The world sucked. Because the future is so incredibly beautiful. And what will happen in that future? Well, Elon Musk tells us, don't worry about your pension fund. AI takes care of that. Or this guy here, Vinod Khosla, he's one of the main investors in OpenAI. He says, if you are 5 years old today, you will not work in your life. AI will take over and you are free to enjoy everything. So this feeling of paradise created by them, right? Total shift of humans' destiny because of their products. Of course, they're not so certain whether they will be fast enough. That's why there is something they are all keen about now, and that is longevity. There's a wave of investments in longevity because they want to be here when it happens. And if it doesn't happen in the next 10, 20 years, they might not be there anymore. So they want to be there. They want to make their life long enough to be here when abundance happens. Because abundance, as you will see later, includes something that they all love, which is uploading their brain to the machine, getting rid of the body, becoming Homo Deus. That sounds also ridiculous, but it's ridiculous plus billions of dollars and political influence. And because we might not like this, we are democracies, we have regulation, we ask ethical questions, and that is an obstacle to them because we need to accelerate the change. We must make it fast. Peter Thiel says it very openly. He doesn't believe that democracy and freedom are compatible. And he's in the camp freedom, not democracy. And it's not the camp freedom of all of us, it's his freedom, not the freedom of everybody. Democracy is an obstacle to AI because AI leads to paradise. So they call this accelerationism. And Mark Andreessen has written about this in his manifesto, that we need to accelerate things because that is how we come as fast as possible to abundance. And democracy is weak, corrupt, broken in the way. We need to remove it. That's the idea behind. We are an obstacle to AI. The main thinker of this, Jarvis Curtin, financed by Peter Thiel, intellectual reference point for J.D. Vance. He says we don't need democracy anymore. Get used to it. We need a CEO, an American CEO who leads us. CEO is over. Democracy is over. Again, they are very open about these things right now. They don't hide this anymore. And since we will probably resist these changes as societies, we need violence. A little bit of violence to force it. That's the third element that you find now in their rhetorics. Look at the list of things Jarvis Curtin considers weakness. Women's rights to vote has to disappear. Abolition was a wrong decision. Income tax has to disappear. Elections, labor laws, decolonialization, gay marriage, it's all a sign of weakness of woke society. We have to get rid of this, together with democracy as such. And we had this already. This is a quote from the Futurist Manifesto, 1909, which became the Italian fascists' reference point when they started in 1919. We want to glorify war, the only hygiene in the world, militarism, patriotism, destructive gesture of libertarians, the beautiful ideas for which we die. We want to destroy museums, libraries, academies of all kinds and fight against moralism, feminism, and against any opportunistic or utilitarian cowardice. Mark Andreessen, the main investor in Silicon Valley, calls him his saint. It's a saint. It's his role model. We should all listen to Marinetti. That's what he's saying. Mr. Karp, Palantir, says, well, who are the winners and losers of AI? Well, the losers are educated women. The winners are not so much educated men. And we are the first non-Vogue company. They're very open about these things. They don't hide it anymore. And they are aligned with Project 2025 of Trump. The director of the Heritage Foundation said this recently: every effort must be made not to recruit women into engineering, but rather to recruit and demand more of men who become engineers. Education, human rights, this is all an obstacle to fast-moving hero entrepreneurs who decide for all of us via AI. And as I said, there will be resistance. And therefore, we need violence. Some of the things they say. Palantir, We are in a moment of reckoning for the West. It's the end game, the end fight, the end battle. Lord of the Rings, Palantir. Elon Musk wrote this on Twitter: "You can't truly call yourself peaceful unless you are capable of great violence. If you are not capable of violence, you are not peaceful, you are harmless." Palmer Luckey, another billionaire in Silicon Valley who invented Oculus and is now in drones, he said this: "Every country needs a warrior class excited to enact violence on others in pursuit of good aims." The chaos that we see right now in the USA, that looks so irrational. Why would you destroy your own universities? Why would you destroy your own regulating bodies? Well, because they are convinced that change can only come if this system is smashed into debris before. And then they can build a new thing about it, above it. Empathy is something we don't need. It's a sign of weakness. Elon Musk. You should not feel empathy with human beings. You should feel empathy with your Western civilization and defend that one. And the best way to do this is a CEO of America who leads us into abundance. Where all this is ending, they are not so clear about. There are two opinions, two camps. One camp says we will move into a moment where our brain is fusing with a machine. Homo Deus. We become immortal. And then we go on rockets and fly to the stars and find some new places. Again, that sounds so absurd. But look where they put their money. Rockets and machine brain interface to come to that point. So this is one direction. Immortal human beings, the next stage of evolution. And the second one is a more religious version of Peter Thiel. That's the rapture camp. Jesus is coming back anytime soon. The signs are there. The four horsemen, there's fire, there's droughts, there's wars. And the more of this chaos we have, the more we can be convinced that the end is coming. And rapture means the good Christians are moved to the clouds and the rest of us suffer here for 1,000 years, and then we are moved aside and the real paradise begins. But pay attention that in that time the Antichrist comes, who looks like Jesus but is not. For Peter Thiel, he's not sure who's the Antichrist. Could be Greta Thunberg, it could be anyone who is pro-regulation. That are his candidates. Again, that sounds so crazy, but it's craziness plus money plus political influence. And that's what we're up against. And that is dark pattern on steroids. That's the next level of danger, where all the things we talked about before are just peanuts. Thank you.
Could you just tell me, and then we will turn to questions in the audience, when did you first kind of apply the dark pattern to Silicon Valley? And you've been talking, you talked today at King's to other people here, you're taking that around. What's been the reaction to this conversation?
Well, already 4 or 5 years ago, when people asked me, so now that you have this dark pattern, and you can predict scandals maybe based on that, who is the next candidate? And I always said Elon Musk. Was obvious to me. I don't think anymore Elon Musk, because with Dodge he destroyed all the regulators that would prosecute him. He's fine now. So then I said, well, the next one for me, who is obviously ticking all the boxes of the dark pattern, is OpenAI. And the key element of that is this kind of ideological belief system that is more and more in the open. That was not so much in the open before Trump was elected, because most of them wouldn't dare to say these things. But now they can, and they do. And it forms a coherent idea. You see, there's so many of them who say these things, and they all fit together into one belief system. And that is a very elite, violent, male, anti-democratic belief system. And that's why we need to understand this and fight it.
And at the same time, the kind of opposite is that I've all got on my phone, on my laptop, you know, very helpful tools that are helping me get my job done. And so that contradiction, that kind of, you know, what's the middle ground between that? You know, how can you, at the IBE we think about kind of individual ethics, organisational ethics and systemic, and this feels like a systemic challenge that needs some kind of global governance to meet it. But what can people, individuals do you think, in the face of this?
It's very difficult. We all use these tools, and we are probably already at this point where we cannot imagine being without them anymore, right? And what we realize is that there's no European product at the moment. These are all American products or Chinese products, which is not better. And we probably need a European, democratically controlled AI answer at one point, which means we need to invest massively as Europe into our own solution, which we haven't done so far. And we sleepwalk into these things, right? The Americans don't regulate. And they don't regulate because of that pressure, but also because they think if we are too strict, the Chinese will be faster.
Yeah.
That's the dilemma. So the first thing that I guess we all need to do is we need to be replacing the sleepwalking through some conscious reflection on what are these things doing to us. And this is just one element. I mean, the whole destruction of symbols, so that we cannot believe in anything anymore. No picture, no voice, no text, everything can be fake. So it destroys the whole symbolic world that we have created. And we contribute by just using these things ourselves. So it's difficult as individuals to find a way of resisting, because not to use it is probably not the answer.
I've got so many questions, but I'm going to pause and share the questions with the audience. I know we've got people with microphones going around. Fantastic. Who would like to ask a question if we do? Just in the front here, the gentleman here.
I'll refer to a movie, Hunger Games. Everybody has seen Hunger Games. The world in Hunger Games is dominated by the corporation. There is no government. So how do you see the relationship between these very large technology companies and the government? Because it is a fact that they are more powerful than the government, also due to financials, right? We've seen what is happening with rockets, etc., etc. So at what stage will the corporation take over?
And by putting Elon Musk into the Dodge exercise, you have a private company destroying the government institutions. You have Palantir sucking up all the data and using them for profit maximization. So we are at a point where governments are losing power and corporations are increasingly powerful. It has always been the case that they are powerful and abuse their power, but with AI, that's a totally new game. And that's why I mentioned before, we need an AI solution that is democratically controlled and European. It cannot be that profit maximizing companies control a key information technology that is reshaping everything we do. That cannot be. That's too dangerous. So the film is actually very close to what's happening. And it fits into the ideology of neoliberalism that was there before. We always have argued in society that governments should be weak. Ronald Reagan said governments are the problem, not the solution. And if you look into all these scandals, absence of regulation was always a part of the issue. Boeing was self-regulating 97% of the Boeing 737 MAX. So they would have Boeing engineers producing parts and Boeing engineers certifying it and sending the results to the regulator who didn't have people to do it. 97%. So in all these cases, the absence of the state is there. And that's part of what they now increasingly accelerate as a tendency. And it fits very well with the project 2025 of the libertarians. They also don't want a government. They want freedom of the rich. And that is this powerful coalition that led to the Trump victory in the end. So I see this now in reality, what this movie was showing. I guess this lady was first.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for an absolutely fascinating talk. I think most of my question was actually asked by the first person, but I guess where I was coming from, it seems to me that we need three elements. We need to have a concept of ethical leadership, and we need to have a concept of strong governance, and then empathy and respect for the individual. And I totally take your point about AI and your point about money, but we haven't even got a conceptual framework as to what kind of person do we want to lead our societies. And I noticed from the point that you made about fascism, about cutting down debate and not letting ethnic minorities or women into power, all of these things needs to be written in, well, it is written into our law, but it needs to be enforced. But I think the problem that we had our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, actually interview Elon Musk, which I thought was probably one of the saddest moments of my adult life. So how do we organise ourselves? I'm not going to say that phrase, to take back control, but to effectively run our societies in the way that we want to run our societies?
Great question.
I think one of the things we need to stop is to praise these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley as our role models. And we do this also in business schools. We teach charismatic leadership, which means nothing else but celebrating these people who are manipulating us in a certain way and who do not care about us. These are sick people. And we need other leaders. And there are other leaders. I mean, these scandals are luckily the exception. There are a lot of good leaders. But if you have done business studies in the last decades, what you probably learned is that if you talk about ethics, that's a sign of weakness. Because you have to focus on business. And we have to change that.
I was at a disruptive tech conference where the keynote speaker referred to a top Silicon entrepreneur who said, culture comes after. And nobody challenged.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you see this in all these leaders as I described, Lehman Brothers, Volkswagen. It was not a secret that they are bad people. It was in the open. The news talked about their way of leading, but we celebrated them. There was an article in I guess, Vanity Fairs about Lehman Brothers CEO before the financial crisis, celebrating his rude leadership style as a winning way of leading a bank. We need to do some soul searching ourselves. What kind of leaders do we want to have in our companies?
Thank you. Next question. Will, sorry, at the front here on the left, Melissa, sorry. And then I'll come to Pablo.
Thank you. Lots of questions, but one that's playing on my mind is what happens next in the US. Are we going to see midterm elections, do you think? Or is that the first step of the takeover by the corporation, by preventing those through violence?
I hope we will see elections, but what I think is possible is that it just only looks like an election, because things are done to prevent real elections from happening. A bit like in Russia, right? People vote, but something else is happening that makes the result go in one or not the other direction. I hope it's not happening, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yes, in the back, in the middle, on the left-hand side, Pablo. Yes, sorry. Is it right, just on the end? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for frightening us. Do you have any hope for us? You've kind of hinted at something that should happen in Europe or could happen in Europe. Are there seeds or the start of something where you could write a a different book with a brightly coloured cover.
There's actually a chapter in the book called The Bright Pattern that shows how you do the opposite of what the dark pattern does. Yes, I'm very hopeful because I think that these Silicon Valley billionaires will fail. Societies do not write narratives top down. I think we will resist, and you see this. The good thing that happened is, look at how it strengthened Europe. And I would include England now into Europe in this. We're stronger together now. We think about being European, being different from America, China, Russia, and focusing on democracy. So I think it was a wake-up call. In that sense, it might be very helpful. And they will not win, because this is just beyond crazy, these things.
Any questions? Louise?
Thank you. Thank you for a fascinating talk. I feel very depressed now. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about shareholders, because in my view, often behind the corporations and some of the behaviour is driven the pressure to create unexpected, unbelievable expectations of profit.
Yeah.
I know there's been a bit of a shift, or was, maybe we're going back to it, but of moving away from the only purpose of business is to create shareholder value. There was a bit of a move towards greater purpose and other stakeholders and so on, which we all celebrate. But I wonder what you feel about the effect and the impact of shareholders on the behaviour of these corporations.
Well, I think at the moment all these topics like sustainability, like CSR, they are no longer in the center. Ethics, compliance. Mm-hmm. We talked about this during lunch. The Department of Justice in the USA, they had 30 prosecutors for corporate crimes. They have fired 25 of these 30, and the remaining 5 focus now on tariffs and drug cartels. So nobody is investigating corporate crimes anymore in the USA. And their pressure on global companies was one of the reasons why there are so strong compliance departments. That's gone. So we need to find other reasons why we want ethics and compliance in our companies. Risk management as an argument is probably not working anymore in the future. But the good news is the climate crisis is not going away only because you delete these words from your documents as a government. It's going to strike us even stronger if we don't act. So sooner or later, all our topics are coming back. We're just losing so much time for nothing.
Thank you. One last question there, and then talking of time, we will move for drinks on the other side.
Yeah. Wonderful, thank you. I'll keep my questions short.
No, please, go ahead.
You've mentioned democratically controlled AI as the need for democratically controlled AI. What does that look like? And I ask that because AI is particularly challenging in the sense that it's a technology that very few people understand, if any one understands. So how do you democratize it?
Well, for me, and you're right, we don't know what these things are able to do, and we are figuring it out as we go along. But the biggest mistake in the whole design is that it's in the hand of companies that maximize profits. That is what has to disappear. So it has to be controlled by governments in a transparent way, which again leads to other questions. If it's the Trump government, I'm not sure whether my answer is a good one. But if I say a European answer, it should be something that we build here with mechanisms of transparency and control. But we also can set limits and say this is what we are not going to publish, like Anthropic is doing right now under immense pressure. So the main thing, I think, is taking it out of the hands of profit-maximizing companies. The same for social media, by the way. It shouldn't be controlled by those who only want us to buy as much stuff as possible. That's a design mistake.
Thank you. So without further ado, thank you for the question. We will draw it to a close, but the conversation continues over the other side. And before we finish, I'd just like to say, firstly, thank you to Kings. I know Laura has gone away, but thank you very much to Kings, to Jonathan. And thank you very much to all of our supporters who are here tonight, who've made this possible, and everyone who supports directly or indirectly the Institute of Business Ethics. I'm very grateful for your support and for us to be able to create conversations like this, which I think are just starting. So I think we need to have more of conversations about AI and ethics and AI. So I look forward to that in coming months. And over there when we have drinks and canapes waiting for us. Without further ado though, I would really like to say thank you for such a thought-provoking talk. Guido, I really appreciate you coming here and sharing both the dark pattern so eloquently and so interestingly, and also bringing into focus such a critically important topic. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.